Hello, I'm Sensei Alex Kakuyo, and the title of today's talk is Understanding the Fire Sermon. But before we get into that, I'll remind you to subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified when I post talks in the future. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that'd be great too. And if you want to do a deep dive into Buddhist practice, check out my book, Perfectly Ordinary Buddhist Teachings for Everyday Life. There's a link to a sample chapter of the book in the description for this talk, and you can purchase a copy on Amazon. Now, the First Noble Truth of Buddhism states, life is suffering. And there's a lot of debate around that phrase, whether or not Buddha actually said it. Some people say, Buddhists say that life is unsatisfactory. Other people say that Buddha stated that life has suffering in it, but he never said that life is suffering. So I'd like to put the matter to rest once and for all. What did Buddha actually say as the First Noble Truth? And the answer is none of it. You see, the Buddha didn't speak in pithy one-liners. He gave talks and discourses, some of them lasting several days. It was only after his death that these talks were winnowed down, if you will, to simple, easy to understand phrases like life is suffering, suffering is caused by desire, etc. The First Noble Truth is a summation of a talk that Buddha gave in what's called the Fire Sermon. He was speaking to the Hindu god Brahma and describing human life. And this is how he described it. The eye is burning. Visible forms are burning. Eye consciousness is burning. Eye contact is burning. Also, whatever is felt as pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, that arises with eye contact as its condition, that too is burning. Burning with what? Burning with the fire of greed, with the fire of hate, with the fire of delusion, with birth, aging, and death, with sorrow, with lamentation, with pain, grief, and despair. It is burning. Now, Buddha did this with all of our senses. Everything we see, everything we taste, everything we touch, etc. He stated in no unequivocal terms that it is burning with the fires of suffering, with greed, anger, ignorance, etc. So, I think it's fair to say that if Buddha were alive today and heard the phrase, life is suffering, he'd probably agree. Now, there are two ways that we can approach the Fire Sermon, however. We can take a hard-nosed, pessimistic stance and say, life sucks, deal with it. Or we can take a pseudo-spiritual stance and say, everything is fine, everything is perfect, even when it's not. Both of these standpoints, by the way, are incorrect. A good understanding of the Fire Sermon requires us to have what I call a holistic view of suffering. Yes, everything we see is a source of suffering. Also, everything we see is a source of joy and contentment. How we interact with these objects, how we train our minds, that's what decides what comes from it. It's a package. And the reason we suffer as human beings is we try to winnow out one from the other. We want the joy and the happiness that we receive from the phenomenal world, but we don't want any of the suffering. We want to smell roses, but we don't want those roses to have thorns. We want to have a pet cat, but we don't want to clean the litter box. We want to eat good food, but we don't want to have to go to the bathroom. And because we do this, because we try to separate grief from joy, suffering from happiness, we struggle as a result. And we enjoy things less because we're always holding it at a distance. So all that Buddha is saying in the fire sermon is that we have to take the whole package. We can't have the happiness and the joy unless we're willing to deal with the suffering as well. He then goes on to teach us how to work with that suffering skillfully, so that we can hold roses and not be pricked by the thorns, so that we can have a pet cat and clean the litter box before it gets smelly, so we can eat healthy, nutritious foods that we don't pay for when we visit the restroom. Our goal in life, if we're living under Buddhist guidelines, isn't to run away from our suffering or to cause ourselves to suffer more. Rather, it's to learn to suffer skillfully. And as we do this, as we learn to work skillfully with all of the suffering that comes from the things we see, from the things we taste, from the things we touch, etc., we're able to move through the world freely, dancing as it burns all around us. So that's the talk for today. I hope it was helpful. If you'd like to read articles I've written about Buddhist practice, visit my blog, The Same Old Zen. The link for that is in the description for this talk. And if you'd like to talk more about the fire sermon or some suffering that you've experienced and worked skillfully with in life, leave a comment in the comment section below. I promise I'll respond. I love hearing from you guys. So that's it for today. Amitabha.